People don't die from exhaustion, they die from compromising with themselves. David Goggins. Imagine waking up one morning and no one admires you anymore. There are no tools to acknowledge your efforts, no reminders, no social pressure. Would you still keep your promises to yourself? Perhaps. This question might seem to carry a moral undertone, but in reality, it's a biological one. The human body can survive with low oxygen, it can adapt to thirst, hunger, cold. But very few people have ever truly tested whether their soul can endure not living to its absolute fullest. This isn't a book for those seeking kindness. It offers no comfort, makes no attempt to inspire faith, and is utterly unfriendly to the spirit of procrastination. On the contrary, it drags you into a journey where every step forward comes not from motivation, but from your refusal to lie to yourself one more time. I can't promise you'll like this book, but perhaps at some point it will silence you. And that moment, that silence in the face of truth, is the real starting point. Now, let me begin with a summary. I sat in the packed auditorium of the Sens City Convention Center. The stage, lights above me, felt like an interrogation. To my left was my mother, to my right, my uncle, the man who had helped my mother and me escape our past hell. They smiled, full of pride, but I felt nothing but emptiness. On that podium of honor, I was about to receive one of the highest accolades for American veterans, the Patriotism and Community Service Medal. The previous year's recipient was Senator John Mikan, a survivor of 5.5 years in a Vietnamese POW camp. I had always considered him the epitome of resilience, of courage. Yet now, my name, David Goggins, was being called in the same breath as his, and I felt undeserving. Don't misunderstand, I don't deny what I've done. I fought, I served, I pushed myself to the absolute limit. But deep in my mind, one question echoed relentlessly. Why was I here? Because looking back at where I started, a scarred, illiterate black kid who once weighed nearly 300 pounds and worked night shifts as a cockroach exterminator for $1,000 a month, none of us, not even me, would have believed I'd ever stand here. I wasn't sitting there to torment myself. I was searching, rummaging through my memories, trying to find the moment, the decision, the punch that ignited the fire that brought me from rock bottom to the top. But I searched and found nothing. Even when my name was called, I hadn't even stood up yet. My mother had to prompt me. I walked onto the stage like someone emerging from a long dream, caught between the present and memories drenched in blood and tears. They read my resume, recounting the funds I'd raised, the goals I'd achieved, the challenges I'd overcome. When the medal was placed around my neck, the entire auditorium rose in applause. But I felt no pride. I felt overwhelmed. That was the first moment I realized, so I really have transformed. Holding the microphone, I looked down at the faces staring up at me, my comrades, my fellow soldiers, the veterans who had spilled their sweat and blood for this country. I should have said something inspiring, something full of bravado. But instead, I started with a name. My grandfather's name, Sergeant Jack. If he were alive, he would be the happiest man to see me standing here today. My voice caught as I tried to continue, and I want to thank my mother who, I looked at her, and when my eyes met hers, I broke down. I closed my eyes, tears streaming out as if a film was rewinding. A flood of scenes rushed back, the last time I saw my father. The moment I left home, driving across the northeastern United States to confront the demon that had haunted me my entire life. That year, I was 24, working night shifts as a cockroach exterminator, barely scraping by. I had dropped out of airborne training because of a fear of water. I was haunted by the feeling of failure. I was fat, lazy, dishonest, depressed. I felt myself falling apart, and I knew if I didn't change, I would die a loser or worse, become a replica of my father, an abusive, alcoholic, contemptuous man. To change, I realized I needed to face the root of it all. I needed to look my demons straight in the eye. I drove back to Buffalo, a place that was once my home, once my hell. It was the first time I'd seen him in 12 years. The old house was just as I remembered, as if time had frozen it. The same chair, the same floor, the same musty smell. It all reminded me of the nights my mother and I slept fitfully on that tattered sofa in the office of the ice rink my father owned. I was 6 years old then, working all night, going to school in the morning, sleeping briefly at noon, then scraping gum off the floor again at night. When I met him again, I had hoped to forgive him. I wanted to believe I had been wrong. But no, he was still the same, still smirking, still drunk, still uttering venomous words about my mother. He was still a toxic man, one who never apologized for anything he'd done. And in that moment, I suddenly understood. I had given him too much power. I had allowed the past to control my present. On the drive back, I stared at the steering wheel and asked myself, how much longer will I keep blaming others? How much longer until I stand up and take responsibility for my own life? That's when I understood one thing: no one was coming to save me. I had to save myself. I had to confront myself without sugarcoating, without softening the blow, without excuses. There was only the truth, and that truth woke me up. That trip, that confrontation with the demon, was the beginning of my transformation. I started studying again, preparing for exams again, dieting, exercising for 6 hours a day, running until I vomited. I lost nearly 110 pounds in 3 months. I rejoined the military, stepped into the hell of training, and I survived. But the most important thing I gained wasn't muscle or achievements, it was a kind of belief. Not some vague, cliché, believe in yourself kind of belief, but the kind forged from every drop of sweat, every time I wanted to quit but didn't. A belief born from hardship, a belief no one can give you. You have to find it yourself in your own pain. And since then, I've lived for one ideal: to view every day as a battle against myself. I push myself further, higher, deeper, not to prove anything, but to extract every ounce of my tiny, seemingly non-existent potential. Because I know if I, a short, illiterate, fat black kid who was once beaten until he bled, could do it, then anyone can. I was never the chosen one. No one ever patted me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you've got potential." No teacher, no coach, no commander ever bet on me. On the contrary, most thought I was a waste of space, a burden, a joke. And so I chose to live as someone no one noticed, but I refused to fade away in silence. I used that invisibility as a camouflage to quietly hone myself. While others slept, I trained. While they gossiped, I read. While they scrolled through social media, I wrote in my journal. Little by little, I sharpened my will like a knife unadorned, seeking no praise, only blood and steel. Most people live within their comfort zone, their familiar zone, their pain-free zone. They define themselves by what's pleasant. But I'm the opposite. I seek out pain. I dig deep into fear. I stare into the dark corners that others avoid because I understand. In pain is truth, and in truth is power. I've seen too many people quit after barely scratching the surface of a challenge. They say, "I can't do it." But in reality, they've never truly given their all. They only try until it gets hard. As for me, I continue even when my body screams at me to stop. I learned to ignore that voice because I know that voice is the greatest barrier. People ask me, "How do you get motivation like that?" And I answer, I don't have motivation, I have discipline. Motivation is something that comes and goes like the wind. Discipline is the stick you use to beat yourself over the head every morning. No matter how you feel, discipline is what you forge in silence, when no one is watching, no one knows, no one praises. Once I woke up at 4:00 a.m. to run in the biting cold of Indiana. I opened the door and saw thick snow falling, the cold hitting my face like a punch. I closed the door, intending to crawl back into bed. Then I stopped. I remembered one thing: I swore I would never go back to my old self, the lazy, evasive, excuse-making self, so I opened the door again. I stepped out. I ran. Every step felt like piercing through ice, every breath felt like draining my last ounce of strength. But I didn't stop, because I knew if I stopped today, I would stop for the rest of my life. And afterwards, when I got home, I felt no glory. I didn't post anything online. I just looked in the mirror and said, "You kept your word." And that moment, a moment no one saw, no one praised, was the greatest reward. People think I enjoy asceticism. No, I don't like pain. I don't like running hundreds of miles. I don't like harsh diets, living in solitude, or iron discipline. But I choose to do it because I want to forge myself, not wait for the world to define who I am. I learned that potential isn't something anyone gives you. It's not in your genes, your intelligence, or your luck. It lies in choice, and you have to choose it every single day. No one will do it for you. If you're invisible, if no one believes you can do anything great, then you are me, and like me, you can choose to live differently. You can choose to fight, not to beat anyone else, but to stop being a copy of your yesterday's self. I'm not perfect. I've been dishonest, weak, and I've given up. I still carry darkness within me, but I've learned to transform that darkness into fuel. I no longer run from it. I turn it into what propels me forward. So if you're waiting for someone to give you belief, stop. Create it yourself. Become living proof that every limit can be shattered if you're brave enough to endure pain, stubborn enough not to quit, and clear-headed enough to see the path you've chosen. You don't need to be the best, the strongest, the smartest. You just need to be someone who never lets their soul die, because no one can defeat someone who refuses to quit. On Christmas Eve, most of the world was bathed in lights, laughter, wine glasses clinking, and shiny gift boxes. But I was sitting in a rusted pickup truck, alone, freezing, with bloody knees and blistered hands, trying to maintain balance in a silence that bordered on madness. This wasn't a dream or a Hollywood movie about a crazy hero. This was reality, and it hurt down to every nerve ending. I was on a trial run for one of the toughest ultra-running challenges on the planet, the Mohican 100-miler. That year, I had no race contract, no sponsors, no support crew. No one was cheering me on. No flares, no banners, just me and a morbid will to find out how far my body could be pushed before it completely collapsed. Christmas for me wasn't a celebration. It was a reminder. A reminder that I once had nothing. A reminder that everyone else was joyful, while I was still fighting every second to avoid becoming a nobody again. And I knew that no matter how many twinkling lights were out there, the only light I needed came from within myself, just like when I was a child. As a child, I used to wish for a gift, a proper meal, a home without screaming, a day without being beaten. Now I wished for something else, to see myself shattered, to know that I could still be reborn. Every step I took in that cold night was a cut on my skin. I had lost my toenails miles ago. My thigh muscles spasmed as if shocked by electricity, and my urine had a metallic smell, a sign my kidneys were starting to react. But I didn't stop. Not because I was a Superman, but because I had once been nothingness. And I knew that only through pain can a person truly recreate themselves. In my life, I'd had many forgotten Christmases. When I was 10, I wandered through a damp boarding house, trying to pick up coins from couch cushions. When I was 15, I heard my mother cry because there wasn't enough money for milk. Christmas was always a year-end test, a kind of icy baptism, and that's why I didn't celebrate it with beer and wine. I celebrated it with sweat, blood, and sheer will. That night, after running nearly 80 miles, my body began to react. My chest felt constricted, my breath hissed like an old exhaust pipe, but I kept going. I pulled a trick from my time in the military, separating myself from my body. When my body wanted to stop, I let my mind detach, like a soldier clinging to a distant call. I became the observer of my own suffering. I wasn't running like David Goggins. I was running like a soul with nothing left to lose. On that dark road, I wasn't just fighting biological limits. I was fighting the voice in my head, the one that always whispered, "You've done enough, you deserve to rest." But I knew that as soon as I listened to it, I'd revert to the fat, failed guy I once was, and I never wanted to go back. Christmas for me was a reminder. No one is coming to save you. There's no Santa Claus, no magic, just you, the road, and the resolve not to die on it. And that night, I survived not because I was strong, but because I was stubborn. The next morning, as the first sunlight filtered through the trees, I shuffled to the finish line. There was no one to greet me, no organizers, no coach to hand me a towel or a hug. I just stood there, knees caked with mud, chest heaving, and eyes dry. I didn't smile, I didn't cry. I just stood like a warrior who had survived a battlefield no one knew about. Someone once asked me, "Goggins, who are you running to prove something to?" I answered, "To myself. To the 15-year-old me who wanted to die in the bathroom because he felt useless. To the 20-year-old me who stood in front of the mirror, weighing nearly 300 pounds and couldn't look himself in the eye. I don't run for awards. I don't run for recognition. I run to prove that I am no longer a product of my circumstances. I am a product of my choices. Each time I overcome a seemingly impossible limit, I not only claim victory for my present self, but also atone for all the times in the past when I gave up. I can't turn back time, but I can live in such a way that the present is strong enough to never repeat old mistakes. After that challenge, I returned to my empty apartment. No Christmas tree, no gifts, no one waiting. I took off my shoes, peeled off my tattered socks, and looked at my bruised and battered feet. But deep inside me was a feeling that money couldn't buy, the feeling of being true to myself. And to me, that was the most precious Christmas gift. Christmas used to be a season of illusion. Now it's a season of testing. testing whether I can still keep my old vow never to compromise with myself. And season after season, winter after winter, I still keep that promise. If you're reading this, maybe you've never run 100 miles in sub-zero temperatures. Maybe you've never been so hungry you had to eat leftover breadcrumbs. But I know one thing for sure. You've probably felt invisible, felt like an outsider, wished someone would see you, believe in you, pull you out of the darkness. I won't tell you the world will change or that someone will come to save you. I can only tell you one thing: you don't need them. Everything you need, the stubbornness, the endurance, the indomitable fire, is dormant within you, but it won't wake itself up. You have to awaken it with your own 2 feet, with your own voice, with your own refusal to surrender. That Christmas Eve, I received no gifts, but I realized one thing: no one in this life is gifted grit. Grit is something you have to dig up from the depths of your own being. You won't find it in advice, in podcasts, in books. You'll only find it when you're alone, when you're about to collapse, and you still take one more step. That is the greatest gift, and no one can take it from you unless you let go yourself. At an age when many people start to feel settled with a home, a family, a steady job, I began to dismantle every structure to plunge into something bizarre: my own mental laboratory. No test tubes, no whiteboards, just one single principle: locking myself into extreme situations to see how far my mind could stretch. I called it my mental lab, the only place where you can test human limits under real conditions. No simulations, no safety nets. This idea began one summer day when I had just completed Badwater, a 135-mile race through Death Valley. People called it the toughest race on the planet, but to me, it was just a midterm exam. Because I knew that after all the glory, what I needed wasn't a medal, but a new battle. I started setting bizarre tasks for myself, like running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours, or doing 1,000 push-ups while my knees bled from unhealed gashes. I recorded everything: my feelings, my body's reactions, my heart rate, even trivial thoughts. I didn't do it because I liked statistics. I did it because I wanted to understand how the mind operates when pushed to the brink of despair. You'd be surprised how much more humans can endure than they imagine, but no one knows that unless they push themselves. In one experiment, I locked myself in a completely dark room for 24 hours. No phone, no books, no sound, just me and the voices in my head. What I realized is that most of us don't know how to be alone. We fear silence, we fear looking directly into the chaotic nature of our own minds, and we distract ourselves with everything: Netflix, social media, constant noise. But in that dark room, nothing could save me from myself. At first, I found myself thinking about bills, about my aching knee, about a negative comment online. Then all those trivial thoughts vanished, leaving only one question: who am I and where am I going? There were no more masks to wear, no roles to maintain. I had to look at my naked self, and that was far from comfortable. Many think Goggins is naturally strong. Not true. I am a product of deliberate mental conditioning. I built an iron cage around my will, day by day, week by week, year by year, by pushing myself into situations normal people avoid. Imagine waking up at 2:00 a.m. in winter, limbs numb with cold, and knowing you have to run 20 miles before work. At that moment, your mind will scream, "You're crazy." And yes, I am crazy. But it's in that madness that I find order. The mental lab isn't a place for showing off. It's a place to peel back every layer of the self, to find the steel core within. Every time I thought I'd hit my limit, I'd step back, observe, analyze, and try a different approach. I didn't need anyone to push me. I was both the scientist and my own test subject. It might seem like self-inflicted torment, but it's proactive confrontation. Because I believe if you don't master your mind, you master nothing. In the process of experimenting on myself, I realized a cruel truth: pain never disappears. It only changes form. If you don't actively step into purposeful pain, you'll be dragged into meaningless pain, the pain of unemployment, of regret, of feeling useless. But if you choose pain in a controlled way, like running 40 miles in freezing temperatures or meditating in silence and darkness, you are transforming pain into a tool, not a burden. I spent hundreds of hours in that lab, both literally and figuratively. I learned that the mind is the only muscle no one teaches you to train. You can learn to lift weights, run fast, breathe correctly, but no one teaches you how to be silent when your inner world is chaotic. No one shows you how to endure the feeling of being misunderstood, overlooked, pushed to the margins. I had to learn that myself, step by painful step. Once I set up a new experiment, running 12 hours nonstop on an old treadmill in my garage. No scenery, no wind, nothing but the whirring of the machine and a white wall. Why? Because I wanted to see how my mind would react when there were no rewards, no beautiful views, no cheering crowds, no variety to distract me, just monotony and sheer will. Around the 5th hour, I started seeing hallucinations, a phenomenon that occurs when the body is exhausted but the brain is forced to keep working. Part of me wanted to stop. But another part, the part I had honed through countless battles, whispered, "This is when we learn the most." That was the moment I understood why most people never reach their true potential. It's not because they're lazy, it's because they don't know how to endure monotony. They constantly need to feel entertained, to feel inspired. But in reality, strength isn't born from inspiration, it's born from repetition. Those hours when no one sees, no one cheers, no background music, no hashtags. You can go to the gym 3 times a week and feel stronger. But you won't change your fundamental nature until you push yourself through those hours without praise, without limelight, without medals. Just you and the mirror in your mind. A sports psychologist once said, "Visualize yourself winning." To me, that's meaningless. I don't visualize the outcome. I visualize the pain. I imagine myself injured, bleeding, left behind, and still crawling forward. I don't need to dream of victory. I need to know I can survive defeat. Once I ran through hail for nearly 3 hours straight. My feet were blistered, my shirt soaked and cold, my eyelids heavy from lack of sleep. I knew I could go back, take a hot shower, eat a bowl of soup, and sleep in a warm bed. But I chose not to because I knew if I went back today, the next time I'd go back even sooner. And from that, the habit of quitting would take root. The mental lab isn't located anywhere specific. It doesn't need equipment, no experts. It's inside you, ready to operate at any moment if you're brave enough to ask the question, what would happen if I didn't stop? You have an unexplored territory in your mind, a place where everything you imagine as a limit is just the shadow of your reluctance to confront it. And if you're brave enough to step into that, even for just one step, you'll never be the same person again. No one is coming to save you. There are no shortcuts, no quick success recipes, just you and the pain. And if you dare to step in, you will emerge with a strength you never knew you possessed. I used to think that once I'd forged my will to overcome hells like Hell Week, run Badwater, or survive elite training courses, I had reached my peak. But that was a dangerous illusion, because the truth is there are no peaks, only cycles. And if you don't constantly rebirth yourself, you'll be swallowed by your own past. That's what happened to me. That year, I was at my peak, my reputation soared. Media outlets began hunting me down. Social media started tagging my name in inspirational quotes. I became an icon, an unyielding individual, a superhuman with world records in pull-ups, ultramarathon running, and an iron will. But in silence, I began to decay. I started reducing my training volume. I slept later, ate more carelessly. I started rewarding myself after every small victory, a new car, expensive shoes, lavish meals. I told myself, you deserve it. That was the most dangerous word in my dictionary. Deserve. It was the reason I became lazy, made excuses, and looked in the mirror without seeing the cold gaze of yesteryear, the gaze of a warrior who had stepped out of hell and sworn never to return. I had transformed into a polished version of myself, clean, bright, applauded, but empty. Then one day I heard the doctor say, "Your heart has a problem, a leaky valve, blood regurgitation. If you continue at this intensity, you could collapse at any moment." I laughed, not because I felt relieved, but because I knew I had brought myself to this point. Me, no one else. That was when I understood it was time to kill the old version and be reborn. A person unconcerned with fame, not led by admiration, not lulled to sleep by success. Someone who lives by one principle, evolve or go extinct. I started with small things. Every morning I went back to my old nail clippers, trimming my toenails neatly because I knew I'd have to run. I set my alarm for 4:00 a.m. again, no snoozing. I put on my worn-out hoodie and hit the streets before dawn. Each first step was a reminder, you're nobody until you prove yourself again. I re-established old challenges, running in blizzards, swimming in cold lakes, climbing mountains alone, no videos, no telling anyone. Just me and the shadow of my yesterday's self. Nothing wakes you up more than setting fire to your own image. In that rebirth process, I discovered a brutal truth. Nothing is harder than destroying the very things that once brought you success. Those heroic memories, old glories, the inspirational quotes that once made me feel invincible. Now they had become a trap, a sweet, silk-lined trap filled with applause. I had to kill the David Goggins that people knew. That's why I returned to the place that had trained me most rigorously, my mind. I locked myself in the old mental lab. No phone, no internet, no email. I had only a whiteboard, a mirror, and one question. What else do you fear? I listed everything. The fear of returning to being a coward, the fear of injury crippling me, the fear of the very community I inspired turning their backs when they knew I wasn't perfect. The fear of losing my aura. I stared at those words as if into a deep lake. Then I did the only thing that kept me. I ran through it. I signed up for an ultramarathon that I knew for certain I wasn't ready for. My physical condition wasn't at its peak. My team was still waiting for a valve surgery schedule, but I needed a battle big enough to shatter the new layers of camouflage I had built. On the day of the race, I woke up at 3:00 a.m. The sky was pitch black, not a sound. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in months, I saw the gaze of the wild man I once was again, empty but clear-eyed. The race unfolded exactly as I predicted, agonizing, miserable, inhumane. By mile 70, the tendons in my legs started tearing, my knees felt like they wanted to fall off. Others would have withdrawn, but I didn't. Not because I was tough, but because I had been here before, hundreds of times in my mind. And I knew this pain was an old friend. You know, many people think wildness is a form of violence. No, wildness is the ability to live authentically, without needing approval. It's daring to look in the mirror and say, I'm not done yet. It's not in the roar. It's in the quiet resilience of those who still stand up when no one asks them to. I crossed the finish line in silence. No audience, no media, no one taking selfies, just me and the self that had been reborn. Once again, from the very ruins of complacency. In your life, you will have to rebirth yourself many times, but you won't always dare to kill the version of you that others love. You'll fear losing recognition, you'll fear being misunderstood. But if you keep living inside that shell, you'll fall into a spiritual death, one more painful than actual death. Don't let fame, achievements, or a polished image imprison you in a gilded cage. Remember, the wild don't live to be loved. They live to be real, and only in truth will you find freedom. Discipline is for the weak, for those who lack the passion, the energy to live by inspiration. My younger self hated discipline. I wanted freedom, wanted to do what I liked, sleep when I wanted, eat anything, avoid all coercive structures. Because to me, discipline was an invisible chain adults used to turn people into machines. I was wrong, completely wrong. When I began the journey to rebuild myself from a fat, lazy, dishonest guy, I didn't start with motivation. I started with discipline. And it was discipline, the very thing I once loathed, that became the savior of my life. I'm not a genius, nor do I have special abilities. I don't possess superior genes or extraordinary intellect. But I do have one thing, the ability to adhere to what I set out to do, even when no one is watching and there's no clear reason left. When you live with discipline long enough, it becomes a part of you, not like a chain, but like a backbone. It helps you stand firm when everything else crumbles. When I compete in ultras, many people ask, what do you think about when you run hundreds of miles? I reply, I think about the next time, not the finish line, but the next time I have to wake up at 4:00 a.m. to keep running. Because for me, the finish line is never the end. It's just a milestone on a continuous journey of self-improvement, and that journey cannot exist without discipline. Many people want discipline like they want to lose weight or learn a foreign language, fast, easy, with clear results. But discipline isn't like a course, it's like a creed. Every morning, I wake up before the sun not because I like it, but because I swore I would never let myself drift backward. Many days I'm tired, sore, fed up. There are times I want to hit snooze, eat cake, or run away. But in my head, an image of my old self, fat, weak, running away, always appears. And I know that if I break discipline today, I'll invite him back. I'm not perfect, but I am a disciple of discipline. To me, discipline isn't just a tool, it's a way of life. It's something I trust more than emotions, more than motivation, more than goals. Because motivation will betray you, emotions will deceive you, goals can change. But if you live by discipline, you can overcome anything. I once had to work night shifts to make a living, then squeezed in runs at 2:00 a.m. I climbed stairs with appendicitis pain, ran with torn ligaments. Not because I was strong, but because I gave myself no choice but to continue. People say, listen to your body. I learned to command my body. Discipline is how I maintain direction when everything around me descends into chaos. It's the compass in the storm, the rope that pulls me from the abyss, the whisper of reason amidst the frenzy of emotions. Once I suffered a severe knee injury after an ultramarathon. The doctor advised me to rest for 3 months. A normal person would have listened, but I was different. I listened, then adjusted not by resting, but by switching to arm exercises, back exercises, pull-ups, planks, lifting weights, meditating. I found every way not to lose my discipline. I knew that if I sat still for just 1 week, I'd start to get comfortable. And comfort is the slow death of a warrior. Imagine a fire. If you don't feed it wood every day, it will die out. And discipline is that wood. If you don't nurture it, don't be surprised when you wake up one day feeling lost, weak, and stagnant. The irony is that modern society celebrates results but undervalues the process. People ask, how do you run 240 miles? I answer, I didn't start with 240 miles. I started by waking up early when it was cold. And I continued to do that, day after day, year after year. Discipline doesn't begin when you achieve something. It begins when you're nobody, and you still decide to live as if you deserve to become something great. Each of us has a weakling inside, a voice that whispers, why are you doing this? Who cares? You can take a day off today. I don't deny that voice, I acknowledge it. Then I stomp it to the ground and step over it. I'm not extraordinary, but I have one rule: if I make a promise to myself, I keep it. Even if only I know. When you live like that long enough, you'll start to respect yourself, not in a hollow self-love kind of way, but genuine respect. Because you know you don't run, you don't lie, you don't bend standards for comfort. True freedom doesn't come from doing everything you want, but from choosing the right things to do and committing to them until the very end. In a world screaming, live by inspiration, I choose to quietly live by discipline, because inspiration might get you started, but only discipline will get you to the end. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. That quote from Mike Tyson isn't just true in the boxing ring, it's true in life, in races, on the battlefield, and even in the quietest moments. When you're sitting alone, thinking you have everything under control, life suddenly delivers a blow. I used to believe that if I trained enough, prepared enough, disciplined myself enough, I wouldn't be caught off guard, that I would always be in control, that pain and failure would steer clear of me. Once again, I was wrong. When life wants to punch you, it will punch you. Without warning, without a sign, without needing a reason, it will come when you're unprepared. And the only thing that matters isn't whether you get hit, but what you do after that punch. I call that the art of getting punched in the face. That year, I was preparing for one of the toughest challenges, the Ultraman competition, 3 consecutive days of hellish challenges, swimming 10 kilometers, cycling over 270 kilometers, and running an ultramarathon. I trained like a maniac, scheduling sleep, meals, and recovery precisely, like clockwork. Everything was meticulously calculated. I entered the competition with extreme confidence, not arrogance, but trust in my own system. The first day I swam well, cycled fine. On the second day I started feeling a dull ache in my lower back, but I kept going. I didn't think it was a big deal. By afternoon, at kilometer 180, I heard a small crack like a snapping rope, and then my back seized up. I couldn't move. I had to stop my bike, stand on the side of the road, my face pale. The punch had landed. Part of me wanted to call for an ambulance. The other part, the Goggins within me, said, "You're not done yet." I tried to stretch my back, press acupressure points, twist my body, then got back on the bike. I wasn't fast anymore, but I pedaled through every rotation as if tearing muscle, every surge of pain like an electric shock. But I knew if I stopped today, I'd lose more than the race, I'd lose myself. And that was what I feared more than any injury. The beauty of unexpected punches is that they strip you bare. They don't ask what school you went to, what religion you follow, how many followers you have. They only ask, will you get back up? And that's a question you have to answer for yourself, in blood, in tears, in desperation. On the morning of the third day, I couldn't stand up. My back felt like it was encased in steel. Every movement was an agony. A nurse came to my room and told me I should withdraw. I laughed and told her to give me 20 minutes. I dragged myself to the floor, lay on my back, and began a series of spinal alignment exercises I'd learned from a physical therapist. Each small movement felt like my guts were being ripped out, but I didn't cry out. I thought of only one thing. Right now, I was rebuilding my identity. After 40 minutes, I could stand. After 90 minutes, I was running slowly but steadily. And I didn't stop until I crossed the finish line. Not because I was invincible or legendary, but because I had lived my entire life amidst punches. I wasn't afraid of being hit anymore. I learned to embrace it, adjust to it, use it as leverage. I remember once talking to a young soldier. He had just failed a special assessment. I asked, "Why did you quit?" He replied, "I wasn't prepared for that pain. I didn't think it would come so fast." I nodded and said, "That's why you need to get hit, not to be knocked down, but to learn how to endure." People often say, avoid failure. I teach the opposite, learn how to fail without losing yourself. Every time I'm knocked down, I write in my journal not to complain, but to record my reaction. I dissect my emotions, analyze my mistakes, note how I responded, then I redesign similar situations so that the next time I encounter them, I won't be shocked. I don't dodge blows. I train my ability to stand firm after each one. Because I understand that in life, you'll be hit many times, and it won't always be fair. People will betray you, plans will collapse, your body will rebel, and your mind will scream, "Stop!" But if you master the art of receiving punches with clarity and calm, no blow will be strong enough to break you anymore. Remember, a punch to the face isn't the end. It's a sign that you're advancing to a crucial place, a place no one enters without being tested, a place where you will either surrender or be reborn. I chose to be reborn again and again until getting hit became a part of life's rhythm. And I hope you will do the same. You can't run forever from what you've avoided. Sooner or later, it will catch up, and then you'll have no choice but to face it. That's called the reckoning, the moment when every lie you've told yourself will be stripped bare. I used to be a master of evasion. I hid my pain behind busyness, concealed my fears with achievements. I wrapped myself in the image of an invincible Goggins, using it as a shield to avoid the shards of the past still lodged somewhere in my chest. But you can't evade forever, because what you don't heal will find a way to return, in the form of dreams, in the form of unreasonable rage, in the form of an unfillable void. For me, that happened after a conversation with my mother. My mother called me one quiet evening just to check in, but when I heard her voice, I felt a lump in my throat. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because it had been too long since I'd called her. I was too busy, or rather, I was too afraid to confront the guilt of having neglected her. She didn't scold me, she just gently asked, "Are you okay?" And I, the strong Goggins the ultramarathoner, Goggins of Nevis, couldn't answer. I sat in silence, tears streaming down. It was a punch no one saw, but it knocked me down. That was when I understood. I needed to settle accounts with myself. I started going back through old journal entries, pages I had written in despair, in loneliness, in madness. I reread every distorted line. "I don't deserve it, I'm useless, I'm my father's shadow." I wasn't reading to torment myself. I was reading to see the full picture, to stop pretending I was okay. For a week, I locked away my phone, no internet, no work, no speaking invitations. I rented a wooden cabin in the mountains and lived alone, like a reverse retreat, not seeking peace, but digging for the truth. I wrote, ran, meditated, talked to myself. And little by little, the fragments emerged. I found myself still angry at my father, still blaming my mother for not leaving him sooner, still resentful of my childhood, still hating the weak kid I once was. I used to think I'd overcome it, but no, I had only hidden it. The more successful I became, the better I got at concealing it, and that's what made me lost. I realized that to truly be free, I couldn't just be strong in body or will. I had to be strong in forgiveness too. Not forgiveness to feel lighter, but forgiveness to reclaim control, the right not to be haunted by the past. I started writing letters to my father, even though he was dead, letters I would never send. In them, I spoke of my pain, my hatred, but also of what I had learned. I didn't write hoping he would apologize. I wrote to free myself from the chain of emotional chemical reactions that had bound me for decades. I also wrote a letter to my mother. This time, I actually sent it. I told her things I had never said, that I was grateful to her, that I felt I had been thoughtless, that I loved her even though I couldn't express it in words for so many years. And then I wrote to myself, to the little boy inside me. I apologized for not listening for so long, for forcing him into silence so I could become strong, for treating emotions as weakness. And I promised that from now on, I would never abandon him again. The reckoning doesn't happen once, it's a continuous process. A series of honest questions you must ask yourself every day. What are you running from? Are you living authentically? What part of you remains untouched? Many think Goggins is a machine, devoid of emotion, only knowing how to run and endure. But I'm not a machine. I'm a human being who was once shattered, once full of hatred, once blaming others, once despising myself. And it's precisely because I dared to look at those cracks that I can live fully. Reckoning isn't punishment. It's an opportunity to restructure, to strip away old layers of paint and rebuild from the foundation. Imagine you are a house. For years, you've repainted, decorated, hung beautiful pictures on the walls, and everyone praises it. But if the foundation is rotting, everything will collapse. The reckoning is when you take down every picture, scrape off all the paint, discard all the furniture to look at that foundation. And if necessary, you tear down the whole house to rebuild. I did that, I still do that. And I know if you're brave enough to start, you can too. Don't fear the truth, don't avoid emotions, don't pretend to be someone else. Let the reckoning begin, not to end you, but to rebirth you. Many people live as if the game is over once they hit 40. They start talking about the old days, about when I was young, as if the rest of their lives are just a quiet epilogue after the climax. Not me. For me, the game doesn't end when you feel tired. It doesn't end when you're bored, doesn't end when you're in pain. It only ends when the final whistle blows, and that whistle, if you're still alive, hasn't sounded yet. This is something I learned during a triathlon race I had no intention of entering until I heard about a man named Scott. He used to be a world-class athlete, but a car accident required multiple surgeries on his leg and shoulder. Doctors told him, "You'll never run again." A few months later, I saw his name on the race registration list. We were both among the top contenders on the first day. I noticed how unevenly he ran, a slight limp, each step seemingly shattering. But he didn't stop. And at one point, when I considered slowing down due to knee pain, I saw him still going, lips tight, eyes like steel. I remembered all the times I had given up not because of injury, but because I was bored, because I allowed myself to rest. That's when I asked myself, Goggins, are you playing to the bitter end, or are you living on a temporary contract? I used to be a quitter. When no one was watching, I'd train. But when no one was cheering, I'd slow down. I'd lift weights, but when there was no coach, I'd cut down on sets. I'd say, I'm exhausted. But in reality, I was just being lazy. That wasn't a limit, it was self-limitation. And each time, I'd hear the voice of my high school gym teacher. He was the first coach to make me finish every workout, even when the clock ran out. You play until the whistle blows, no sooner. That lesson stayed with me my entire life. I didn't finish the race to win an award. I finished to remember my identity. I am someone who plays until the very end. And from then on, I started applying this principle to everything, not just running, but work, relationships, discipline, learning, self-improvement. You want to write a book? Write until it's done. You want to learn a new skill? Learn until you master it, not just until you get bored. You're recovering from a fall. Keep going, even when no one else has hope. Sometimes you don't realize you're quitting, you just think you're taking a short break. But that short break, repeated often enough, becomes a habit. And at some point, you lose the ability to go all the way. I once did an exercise with myself, whenever I wanted to stop, whether I was training, writing, studying, or even in a difficult conversation with someone, I would continue for just 5 more minutes. Just 5 minutes. And I realized that those almost quitting minutes are where my true nature revealed itself. Those 5 minutes are where you learn to endure without reason, where you no longer need background music, no longer expect rewards. No one is watching, no one is counting for you. That is the sacred ground of those who know commitment, the land of warriors. And I believe anyone can reach that land if they dare to keep going after they want to stop. One of the things I often remind myself is that a happy ending doesn't come from luck. It comes from not leaving the field before the game is over. Sounds simple, but it's not easy to do. Because most of the time, that game is with yourself. You have to fight the voice that says, "Who cares?" Fight the feeling of, "I've had enough." Fight every logical reason to stop. Because reasons always seem logical when you're tired. I once had a winter run. The temperature was -10°C, the wind slashed at my face like knives. Mid-run, hail started to fall, sharp and painful. I stopped under the eaves of a house. The people inside looked out, their eyes a mix of pity and surprise. I stood there with two choices, turn back or continue. I remembered the principle, the whistle hasn't blown yet. And I kept running, not fast, not graceful, not pretty, but every step, every breath was an affirmation. I am still here. After getting home, I felt no heroism. I didn't post about it, I didn't celebrate. I just looked in the mirror and knew that today, I had played until the whistle blew, and that was enough for me to stay whole. Remember, you don't have to be the best. But if you're the last one off the field, the one still playing when everyone else has quit, then you are a legend in your own right. Live like that until the whistle blows. At a certain point, you have to ask yourself, have I truly squeezed my soul dry? Not just my body, I've done that hundreds of times. Not just my will, because I believe the will can be reborn. But my soul. That core part inside you that no one else can touch, where all your fears, beliefs, purpose, identity, and pain are stored. That's where I decided to go to the very end. I'm not talking about the muscle pain after a 100-mile race. I'm talking about the pain of truth when you realize you're still living half-heartedly, still avoiding the dark corners within yourself. Reaching the soul, squeezing it dry, is a journey I embarked on without fanfare, without pressure, without anyone knowing. But I knew if I didn't do this, I would die without truly living. I started by going back to myself, not the Goggins of the present, but the 10-year-old Goggins, the boy who was beaten, ridiculed, living in the shadow of an abusive father and the cries of a helpless mother. I closed my eyes, put myself in that body, and asked, "Have you forgiven?" The answer was no. I thought I had forgiven by overcoming, by succeeding, by inspiring millions. But that wasn't forgiveness, it was replacement. I replaced pain with victory, memories with records, weakness with an image of invincibility. But the soul doesn't operate on logic. It doesn't measure by achievement. It measures by how deeply you've touched the bottom of your own being and dared to stay there. So I started squeezing, little by little, like a farmer milking a cow, no rush, no haste. Every morning I wrote a question on paper. What have you never said? Who do you hate? Where are you pretending? What do you fear most if others knew? The answers made me shiver, not because they were horrible, but because they were true. I feared being forgotten, feared that I wasn't truly strong, feared waking up one day and realizing I was just a product of marketing. Feared no one would understand that behind that tough exterior was a soul still trembling. And I continued to squeeze. I began shedding the things I clung to, intense training schedules to fill voids, inspirational videos, praises. I spent more time in silence. Running without a watch, training without music, sitting alone without my phone. I wanted to know who I was when everything external was stripped away. Once I sat before a mirror, not to check my hair or fix anything, but simply to look without blinking, without analyzing, just looking. And after a few minutes, I no longer saw my face. I saw the things beneath the skin, loneliness, resentment, the yearning for recognition. But it was also then that I saw courage, not the kind of courage that charges into battle, but the courage of someone who dares not to run from himself. When you squeeze your soul dry, what's left isn't dust, but gold. You will see what cannot be taken away, honor. You will find a place where you don't need others to understand, because you understand yourself. You will find a stillness that doesn't come from yoga or meditation, but from having nothing left to hide. I know many readers will feel confused reaching this point. They want a beautiful ending, a powerful motivational message, but I don't have that. I only have the truth. You will never truly be finished. You will always have something to face, something to discover, another layer to peel back. And that's not a burden, it's a privilege, because it means you are still alive. Squeezing your soul dry isn't to exhaust yourself, but to live lighter, more authentically. No more masks, no more titles, no more needing to prove anything. I didn't write this book for you to become me. I wrote it for you to become the unearthed version of yourself. If there's anything I leave behind, it's not a formula, but a question. Have you truly lived to your fullest? And if the answer is no, then that's good, because the game isn't over yet, the whistle hasn't blown, and your soul is still there, waiting for you to dare to squeeze it.